Is modern dating broken, or are you just entitled? That's the question we're going to look at today. By the way, it's been a long day. I'm just going to kind of do this off the cuff. Did a little bit of preparation, but this video might be a bit messy, so I apologize in advance. This is going to be a reaction video. We're going to be looking at a channel called Wisdom Warriors, and in particular, two videos that he created. First one is Why Dating is Broken in 2024, What Boomers Don't Understand. And then the other one is Dating is Broken, Why High Status Doesn't Matter Anymore. And the reason I want to respond to these videos is not to tear down this guy. I actually like him quite a bit. I think he has a great channel. I don't think he's a Christian, but I do like his general approach, emphasis on self-improvement, bettering oneself, becoming an honorable man, that kind of thing. I really respect that. But I think he is stuck in a particular mindset that is he's kind of created this paradigm, I guess, to shield himself, I think, from the actual reasons he's struggling with dating. And actually, I don't even know how much he's struggling with dating. I'm just going off of the video. He seems to indicate in some places that he is struggling, and in other places he's not struggling. So I'm not here to judge the guy. But what I want to offer as a thesis, I guess, is as the title implies, I don't think modern dating is broken. A lot of people claim this, and I think they're using it as an excuse or a cope, if you will. And I think the real issue going on is that a lot of men and women have an inflated view of their attractiveness that is preventing them from making rational dating decisions. And what I mean by rational dating decisions is basically like understanding what level you are at, what value you actually bring to the table in the dating market, and then making choices based on that. And of course, if you have an inflated view of your value, then you cannot do that as easily. So I'm going to watch parts of his video on an amplified speed because we don't have time to watch 27 minutes worth of video. So I'm going to put this on, I think 1.25 speed, and hopefully this is going to come through okay. So we'll watch the first 2 minutes.
Okay, team, I want to talk about the dating market and just general relationships in 2024. This is something that no other generation understands except Zoomers and maybe millennials, and that is dating is totally broken. Me and my brother, I'm 26, my brother is a little older than me, and we are undoubtedly the first men in our entire ancestral lineage, going back like thousands of years, to not be married by the age of about 22 or 23. My parents, my grandparents, my great-great-grandparents, my great-great-great-great, as far back as you go, it just gets younger, right?
I'm going to pause there real quick. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think he's saying there's anything wrong with that. But I think we can all agree that people are getting married later. I think there are rational reasons for that. I don't think that by itself is this commentary on a broken culture. But nevertheless, it is interesting, and I think a lot of people can relate to that, you know, maybe you are the first person in your family to get married in your 30s or whatever, or still be single in your 30s. And so it can be alarming when you look back over your family tree and then look at the position you're in. It can be alarming, but I don't think there's anything inherently wrong with that. And I do think there are some positives to that, although that's not really the topic of this video.
And this idea, the fact that there's so many people about the age of 30, even older than that and younger than that, that aren't in long-term relationships, that aren't married, it's creating a very different world from our parents and even from our grandparents. They can't understand. My parents were talking to me the other day. They're like, you know, why aren't you in a relationship? Blah, blah, blah. They think it's me overcomplicating it. Like, oh, I'm looking for a unicorn, or, oh, my standards are too high, and my standards are really high. But also
So pause there. Notice he's acknowledging his standards are really high. Let's keep that in mind kind of as we keep going through this video.
They don't understand that the entire field and sexual market of dating is totally flipped on its head right now. And that's what I want to talk about in this video. The biggest problem with dating today is a lack of familiarity and friend groups that interact with other friend groups. This is so important. The lack of familiarity is crushing dating. And it's because of how men relate to the dating market and how women relate to the dating market, which we're going to get into. So,
all right, so we're going to pause there. I'm going to I'll minimize this so you can see Evernote again. I'm going to summarize all of his videos real quickly. Basically, the idea he's presenting is that the modern dating market is broken because of dating apps. I don't think he comes out and says it that bluntly, but if you boil it down, that's, I think, basically what he's saying, at least for the era we're currently in. He does also kind of throw in things like clubs into the mix. Basically, these zones, which he calls unfamiliar territory, where women cannot validate a man's status by observing how other men treat a man. Therefore, the high value men in those zones and those territories are just the men who look the best. So we're not judging or vetting or validating men based on their character, how other men perceive them or treat them, what they're able to accomplish. It's just looks. And so this leaves high value men, and he calls himself a high value man, as we'll see later on. This leaves high value men who are just average looking out to dry. And from the perspective of whether dating apps are rough for average looking men, I mean, we should all be able to agree that that's the case. I will certainly acknowledge that that is the case. So this is unfortunate for high value men, since they're not getting matched with people who, they could be married to. But it's also dangerous for women because they end up in meaningless situationships with, quote, chads, unquote, that use them and then toss them. And later we'll see he's going to promote what's called the alpha widow theory. He doesn't use that term, but this is kind of like a manosphere, red pill, black pill concept that I've seen proposed that probably does have some merit to it. Basically, that women are getting used up by chads, spit out, and then they don't know how to have proper relationships after that. I'll elaborate it more later on. But basically, he's saying these unfamiliar territory, as he calls it, the dating apps, the clubs, where it's all look-centered, it's not just bad for men, but it's also bad for women. And so later on, he's going to get a little bit white knighty as he lectures women on what they should and shouldn't do. But we'll get to that later. So then he says the solution to all of this is to return to in-person communities, what he calls familiar territory, where men can demonstrate their high status to women through characteristics other than looks. And some of this I agree with, some of it I disagree with. But again, the larger question we're going to be answering is whether modern dating is actually broken, or whether this guy and men or women who think like him actually just have a little bit of a entitlement complex underneath that's maybe preventing them from understanding why they're actually struggling with dating. So let's jump into examples, kind of teasing out this theory of his. So we're going to keep going. I'm going to watch maybe another minute. I don't know. I'm just going to skip around in the video. Hopefully this ends up not being too discombobulated, but we'll see.
Back in the day, 25 years ago, 30 years ago, if you went to the park on a sunny, beautiful day like this, there's probably going to be hundreds of young people playing sports, playing games, interacting, open to socializing. Same thing with the beach, the town square, like wherever, right? And that's because there's no phones. Okay, things changed really drastically in the past decade with social media and with phones.
So I'll pause right there. What he is doing is romanticizing the good old days. And I see this in lots of different areas of psychology, sociology, or whatever. I'm making it sound like I'm way more learned than I actually am. But I see this in a lot of different contexts, the good old days theory. I guess the most common context for me, or the most common example for me as a Christian, is when I see other Christians talking about how some earlier time period in American history was the good old days and we need to return to that. And so he's kind of applying the same good old days mindset to maybe the pre-internet generation where supposedly people were just out in gyms and clubs and rec leagues and churches, just having these incredible, rich, vibrant social experiences. And we were all connected and no one was isolated. And now the internet comes along and we're all, experiencing this close but separate phenomenon where we're extremely close and yet we're extremely disconnected. And I think that is probably a myth. I think that kind of viewpoint struggles really badly with survivorship bias, which if you're not familiar with survivorship bias, you should look it up. There's kind of a cool back history or some interesting examples of that, some better examples of this that might help explain it. But what a lot of men will do, in particular, men in the manosphere, is they will say something like, the women today are twice as difficult to obtain and they're half the value, and they'll compare it to their grandmothers or their moms, how their grandmothers or mothers were so much higher value than women today, and how their grandparents met at some barn dance. And actually that's the case with my grandparents and my parents. Both my maternal grandparents and my parents met at a dance, which is cool. The problem with romanticizing our parents and our grandparents is we're just looking at the examples that actually worked. It's not like we have data and stories, or at least not anecdotes, of people who were, miserably lonely their entire lives. And because the internet exists, they didn't even have an outlet really for sharing it, for finding community. Maybe they just went to the bar every night and got drunk and just drank their sorrows away. We live in an age today where you can be lonely, but you can also be very vocal about the fact that you're lonely. You can let the entire world know that you're lonely. And that's why I'm skeptical of this so-called male loneliness epidemic, which I'm sure you've heard of. There has been a lot of research done on it. There probably is some merit to it, but I'm not convinced that we're in this unique period in history where men are lonely, and in the past they weren't lonely. I just think in the past you did have a tremendous amount of lonely men, and we'll never hear their story. They never wrote it down. They didn't have Reddit to go on and complain to. Instead, they literally just lived out their lives, worked day after day after day, lived alone, maybe went to the bar and drank their sorrows away, who knows, and then died, and that was it. Sounds depressing, right? But that was a lot of human history. Consequently, I want to push back, therefore, against this idea of the good old days, the male loneliness epidemic. But still, I do acknowledge that there are a lot of lonely people today. So it does raise the question, even if we're not in a uniquely lonely time, what can we do about it?
You go to the gym, for instance, it used to be this temple of social upliftment, right? You and your boys are all talking. No one has earphones in. Think about going to the gym and no one has earphones in, right?
So what you just described would be really annoying. Like, I go to the gym. I wouldn't want to be hanging out with my bros constantly, slapping one another on the back. I like going to the gym, plugging in, and just getting my workout done. So again, he is really seeing the past through rose-colored glasses. Like, yeah, I understand it. It can seem odd in the gym that everybody's just in their own little world, but we're actually not. Like, I go up to people and talk to them all the time. Other guys, I'll just go up and compliment them, ask them, hey, what do you recommend for biceps or triceps or something like that? And I also do cold approaching in the gym, and it works just fine. So he's gonna make a really big deal about the supposed isolated world we live in, and I don't agree that it's that isolated. Honestly, I think people like him just want to describe it that way because it's gonna fit into their larger paradigm of explaining why he's not able to get dates, as we'll see in a moment.
Everyone's listening to the same music and talking, slapping each other on the back. There's more relationships in general. And this translates to going out, walking the streets, going to the park. There's much more of a sense of open cohesion in public with community. Just imagine the town square, the park, 25 years ago. You go out, you see 5 people you've seen around town, around the city before. Hey, what's up, Mark?
All right, so I think you get the idea. I'm going to skip forward a little bit. Next point I want to look at is, so at a 4-minute mark, he starts to ask the question of kind of how did the dating market get ruined? So let's watch that.
Really hard today because now we live in a totally unfamiliar, disconnected world.
So again, when he talks about an unfamiliar, disconnected world, this is basically a euphemism for we now have dating apps. He's using this terminology that sounds, I guess, more interesting. I think he's almost just trying to avoid admitting, at least really overtly, that he's struggling on dating apps. He does later say he's struggling on dating apps, but he wants to use this jargon that kind of makes it seem more profound than it actually is. Like he could just be saying dating apps.
And unfamiliar worlds create short-term dating strategies, which we're going to get into. So in familiar dating scenarios, this is high school, this is college, okay? And these two things have a monopoly on socialization. I didn't go to college, and a lot of people who don't go to college are always stuck in the unfamiliar world.
So I'll comment on that real quick. I do agree for Christians, going to college is quite a good experience. Basically, my entire friend group since college has been college people. I don't really stay in touch with anyone from high school. I did date some in college. College was a very formative time. My college friends are part of the reason I ended up in Cincinnati after I graduated. So I do agree with that. If you did not go to college and you also didn't have a really vibrant, I guess, high school group, I can see how that could add to the struggle.
Familiar world is like, maybe 200 people of the opposite sex, right? And 200 people of the opposite sex are familiar with you. They've seen you around, they've seen you interact, and maybe 10 of them, are even more familiar with you. When the opposite sexes are familiar with each other, there's much more long-term dating strategies taking place. Women aren't just all going for the cutest, hottest, and most smooth guy. And also, they're getting to know many guys, right? And then they're choosing for what would actually be a good partner for me, whose personality, whose looks, whose vision and values most match me. And that's what good dating should be, is who's going to be a good match for me. If you're a 10.
Okay, so we'll just pause there. I agree with him. If you're in some kind of context, or what he calls a familiar territory, where you're getting to observe the entire person, that is a superior place to date versus just dating apps. I agree with that. And later in his video, his kind of solution to all this is going to be that we continue to force ourselves into community so that we're in those zones. But I still don't think he has quite the full picture of why he's struggling. And I also don't think dating apps are inherently bad. I just think they're another avenue that you should try. Whereas he presents more of this black and white dichotomy, like you're either in the unfamiliar zone, dating apps, or you're in the familiar zone, community. And it doesn't have to be one or the other. It can be both. And in my dating strategy guides, I always talk about casting a wide net. I would never advocate somebody just be on dating apps if they can also be in IRL situations, church, rec leagues, board game nights, whatever kind of friend group activities. Yeah, you shouldn't just be in one or the other.
In terms of personality and looks, right? You're going to find another 10 in terms of personality and looks, 9 to 9, 8 to 8, something around there, right? What happens in unfamiliar situations, and this is dating apps, and this is also clubs, this is where young people, I can't meet young people anymore, okay? This is so hard for me.
Okay. So he's going to go and this point, I want you to pay close attention. He's going to say, it's really hard for me to find other young people my age. I think it's coming up.
I'm 26. I go out all the time. Coffee shops, parks, dances, concerts, things like that. It's really hard for me to find other young people my age.
Okay, so notice he's acknowledging that he's forcing himself into what he would call familiar zones or familiar territories. and yet he's still saying it's difficult for him to meet people my age. Now there's a bit of a disconnect here. And again, we haven't watched a lot of this guy's content. If you watched more of this video and the next video, I think it would be kind of clear that there's a bit of this contradiction he's presenting where he is following his strategy of being in familiar zones, and yet he's still not getting dates from them. Or again, that's kind of my interpretation. It seems like he's not having a lot of dating success. So my translation, and this is going to tie into my deeper analysis of his situation later on, but when I hear someone like that say that basically they're casting a wide net, they are putting in the effort in order to meet people their age, in order to meet potential options. They're putting in the effort to do that, but they're still not meeting candidates for a long-term relationship, a spouse, whatever. I don't know how else to interpret that other than what they're really saying is it's hard for me to find people I am attracted to who are also attracted to me. And now that ties back in with his earlier statement when he said, my standards are really high. So you kind of see this narrative that's forming. All right, I'm going to skip forward to 6:30.
Men, like all night from different types of men, right? And the problem is they're going to choose the man who's like the most beautiful and smooth on the outside, right? And they might, have a little fling, do something, but the chances of that working out well is really low because it's an unfamiliar situation.
Okay, so right now he's complaining about how in the unfamiliar zones, again, what are basically just dating apps or clubs, looks-centric avenues for finding romance. He's basically saying these are going to result in shallow relationships. And, that's possible, but I'm not certain that has to happen. And I also don't think he understands that, looks are going to be a major factor even in what he calls familiar zones.
That man has like the attention of like 10 different women looking at him, right? And he's going to go choose the best one. But the best one he chooses and the best one she chooses are based off superficial connections, right? And this is the challenge with unfamiliar dating worlds. So for me, my personal experience here, right?
All right. So just to summarize, and by the way, if I'm insulting your intelligence by summarizing him, I apologize. He's saying that women are in these zones, in the unfamiliar zones, they're going to pursue shallow relationships. And so again, we're getting this sense of like, man, why won't these women, these girls recognize that they're not going to find a genuine guy like me there? Why won't they have the wisdom to go into the familiar zones, the communities, places where guys like me will be, so they'll choose guys like me? So a bit of the frustration coming out there.
I am probably a 7 on a good day. I have a good personality, good charisma. My face, yeah. There's some issues. I know people watching this and be like, "Oh, you're beautiful," or "Oh, you're ugly." It's like I would rate myself a 7. Okay.
Okay, so he has rated his looks a 7 out of 10. I'm not gonna give this guy a full-blown looks analysis right now. That's not really the purpose of this video. Suffice to say, this guy is not a 7 out of 10 on a bell curve or a normal distribution, which actually matches how looks work in the human population. He's probably more like a 5.5. I'm not going to belabor that point, but by the way, 5.5 is great. It means you're well above average. Again, most people don't think in terms of bell curves, so they hear 5.5 and they think, wow, you just insulted that guy so bad. Actually, I did not insult that guy at all. That's roughly around where I'd put myself. I'd put myself somewhere between, like maybe a 5 or a 5.5. So the reason I emphasize it, or I want to bring it out, is going back to this theme of him. He considers himself a high value man. He has very high standards, and he's confused why he can't find anyone.
I tried Hinge, a dating app, for 3 weeks. I paid for it. The premium Hinge, right, in a city. I paid $75 for it. I got 2 likes in 3 weeks. I got 2 likes. Okay. And this review
That's absolutely what an average man could expect on a dating app like Hinge. I don't remember exactly what my numbers were, but by no means was I slaying on Hinge. I just kind of, when I was on Hinge, I'm not using it anymore, but when I was using Hinge, yeah, I just kind of kept it running and I'd swipe maybe a couple minutes a day. I've spoken about this before. I'll keep mentioning it. I just had a system where when I was resting between sets in the gym, that's when I would swipe on apps. So it wasn't like this thing creeping into my life. And yeah, over the course of few months, yeah, I wasn't getting a ton of likes. I did go on some dates. I definitely got some interest, but yeah, I'm not a Chad. He's not a Chad. So it's a grind. It's a grind for average looking guys, no doubt.
revealed something to me is Hinge is optimized again for that 1% of men. It's not even 5%, it's literally 1%. That 1% of men who are a 10, right? And they optimize their profile. They have perfection.
Okay, so Hinge is not optimized for Chad. Female psychology is optimized for Chad. And the same thing with male psychology. I mean, men, we all know. No, I don't need to belabor that point. I don't need to go into depth how men will bend over backwards for a beautiful woman. No, this is just human psychology. It's not like the dating apps go out of their way to create some kind of algorithm that rewards good looking men. That's just the way hypergamy works, whereby both men and women are trying to seek higher value, or some people would say that only women are hypergamous. I don't really agree with that. I think both men and women, when we go on the dating market, we're always trying to maximize the value we get from the opposite sex. And of course, in the case of women, they're going to go, an evolutionary psychologist would say that this is part of their evolutionary heritage. They're trying to find the healthiest mate so they can have the healthiest offspring, and beauty is tied to health. I don't really believe the evolutionary psychology perspective, but obviously there's something to be said for beauty as it relates to health. This is just rational behavior, and the dating apps can't do anything about that. All they can do is present you with profiles, and if somebody's unattractive to you, you're going to swipe left, and if they're attractive, they're going to swipe right. And sure enough, it turns out that most women don't find most men attractive when they're just looking at dating profiles. So yeah, the solution he's going to present later, going into familiar zones where we are kind of experiencing the opposite sex in a more holistic way, that is more effective for vetting. That's more ideal. But I also don't think that has to be the only way you can meet people. You can meet people through apps, and then you can vet them afterwards. And I guess I just don't see the need to beat up on apps. Apps are just a tool. They're just one avenue. Whereas, again, for him, all of this is fitting into this paradigm he's kind of using, I think, to shield himself from the truth, which is that his standards are too high, and that'll come out more as we continue.
Professional photo shoots. They probably studied how to do the prompts and everything, right? And every woman who goes on Hinge
So he's also saying that the 1% men, they've optimized their profiles as well. They have the best prompts. They have the best photos. It doesn't matter who you are. You should be using good photos for your dating app. That's just for your dating app profile. That's non-negotiable. Absolutely non-negotiable. If you're not using pro photos, you've weakened your profile. Or if it's not pro photos, you should at least have a friend with an iPhone or something that takes amazing photos. It's inexcusable. You're not taking dating apps seriously if you're just throwing up some random photos that, I don't know, you pulled off Facebook or whatever. And then prompts. Yeah, I mean, I've heard stories, or I've seen examples of guys with supposedly funny prompts that get a lot of attention. I'm not really convinced that that's a strong strategy. I think it's a little gamey or silly. I'm not certain how well that really converts into long-term quality relationships. I think at the end of the day, 95% of the value of your dating profile is just your pictures. Not saying that everything else is arbitrary or you could write anything, should put effort into it, but at the end of the day, your pictures are going to rule on dating apps.
Who is like attractive. Like I got a couple likes from what I would deem like unattractive women who aren't in my league, right? But all the attractive women who are like 6 and above are only going for that guy. And guess what? That guy will be willing to sleep with people who he wouldn't necessarily date. And this is what women don't really understand about men is when
All right, so this is where he's going to start white knighting and pontificating and warning women about what's called basically alpha widowing.
men have options, right? Yeah, maybe they'll entertain an option for a little bit, but they're really looking for someone who matches them mentally, emotionally, physically. Like that's what men are looking for. That's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a woman who matches.
No, that's not what all men are looking for. Some men are just legitimately trying to sleep around and build a roster of women that they can rotate through. So, that's not true. And if women go for that kind of guy, then it is on them, and a wise woman is going to know whether she's interacting with that kind of guy. It's not like she's going to be surprised by that and find out he is that kind of guy. He's going to make his intentions pretty clear early on. So again, I think this kind of warning he's offering to women is kind of silly. The women who are getting into these kind of situationships where they end up getting used by Chad or they share Chad with numerous other women. I mean, they know what they're doing and they're willing to let it happen.
Me. And I would take a 10 personality and a 6 looks or a 5 looks like almost any day. The problem is those women are looking upward because we're in an unfamiliar world. So those 6s and 7s are looking upwards towards like 8 and 9 in men, and they can.
Okay, so now he's kind of saying, I would even go for a 5 or a 6 in looks, but they're all going after Chad. I'm sorry, but there's only so many Chads to go around. And this is so common, by the way, this kind of excuse he's using. The YouTuber that's really popularized this type of thinking as of late is a YouTuber called HoMath, HOE_math. I like a lot of his content. He's also pretty funny, but he really rides hard this idea that Chad always wins, which is really a black pill idea. And there is some truth to it. But basically that Chad is just gobbling up all the women and there's none left for the rest of us. And I'm sorry, but that's just not reality. There's only so many Chads to go around. And at some point you have to stop blaming Chad for your dating problems and take a little bit of ownership that, again, maybe you're entitled. Maybe your standards are too high. Maybe you're not actually as attractive as you think you are.
Land those guys for a short period of time, but those men will move on. And that's the issue, is we're in an unfamiliar dating.
All right, so that was a little bit of the alpha widow theory being exposed there. Basically, Chad, he goes through and uses a whole bunch of women, and then those women are messed up then because for the rest of their lives, I don't know, the next 5-10 years or whatever, they struggle to enter into relationships with quality, average, high value men like him because they're always thinking, oh man, I had Chad once in the past, I can find Chad again. And so they're never content. They're always looking for the next Chad, but they've been widowed by Chad, or they've been widowed by this alpha. And so they're called alpha widows. And, in a sense, they're ruined after Chad used them. And so he's trying to warn women, don't get alpha widowed, don't get sucked in by Chad, because then you might miss out on a guy like him who's this high value man, but maybe isn't 10 out of 10 in the looks department, as he would say.
Dynamic right now, and dating apps, social media, and like these unfamiliar communities are ruining everything. So I just want to interject here.
All right, so yeah, there he kind of came out and said a little bit more bluntly, dating apps are ruining everything. No, they're not. He's going to go into kind of some common black pill talking points, which I agree, they're actually legitimate talking points about how difficult dating apps are, but it's not where we're going to go with this video. So we're going to go to minute 10:30. He is going to start talking about his solution to this problem.
solutions to this video. And number one, this is what both sexes need to do today. And that is go get involved in communal activities, whether that's dance, volleyball, fucking board game night. I don't really care. Dance, volleyball, frisbee have been best for me. I bet like comedy clubs and things like that are also successful. But we need to do communal activities together where we actually build familiarity with large numbers of people. And when we do this, dating will be far more successful, especially for you ladies. I know ladies watching this, you might have fucking 10 DMs, you have 20 matches on Tinder. That's a totally different reality for every other guy in the entire world almost, just to let you know. But also, that is not who you should actually be with, most likely. You need to build familiarity in communal settings, because then you can actually select for people who have like their pheromones are right, their chemistry is right, their personality is right. Like all of those little factors that go so much deeper than how they look and what they do, right?
All right, I'm just gonna pause it there. I think you get the point. So he's went into this pontification, this moral lecture, again, warning women, letting them know, hey, you need to stop just going after Chad. You know, you're being shallow. You need to go to, again, what he calls familiar territory, places where you can see other men vetting men like him. And then you'll know that he's a quality guy and you should go after him. And the truth is, most women aren't on dating apps. I'm pretty certain that's true. But I mean, the ratio on dating apps is extremely skewed, in case you aren't aware. Like on Tinder, I think it's like 3-1 or even 4-1. So men who are much more looks focused are more likely to use dating apps, and women who are less looks focused are less likely to use dating apps. Surprise, surprise. Like women already know to a large extent that dating apps aren't going to be the place where they're going to find Mr. Right or whatever. And again, I think that women, just like men, should be using dating apps, but to use them exclusively is, yeah, draining and painful and miserable. And also, women can struggle on dating apps just like men. Like just because you have 1,000 likes in your dating app, which I think he gives a example, maybe he already did, I forget, with a friend, a female friend of his who was on Hinge, who had something like 5,000 likes. Just because you have 5,000 likes doesn't mean you have 5,000 quality options waiting for you. And, you know, just a matter of which of these amazing guys do I want to marry? No. Women who have a lot of options on apps can have a miserable time. And then also it is reality that there are some women that don't get a lot of matches on apps. That's not as common as men. Like an average looking woman will do way better than even a good looking man on a dating app. There's tons of Tinder experiments, dating app experiments you can watch on YouTube proving that. But I do get a little bit tired of this claim I see by MGTOW, Manosphere, Black Pill, whatever, basically acting like women just have it so easy. They never have any issues. It's only the men that are struggling on dating apps. That's just not true. So I do think women understand that. I think a lot of men are waking up to this. So where do I want to go with this? I think there's just a couple more points. Let's jump ahead.
Briefly, if you're a woman watching this, don't wear headphones at the gym. Just some advice for you. Say hi to guys, build relationships. And if you're a man watching this, same thing. Like,
okay, so I just want to touch on this because I think this ties into his naivete or his paradigm of how he wants the world to work. People wear earbuds and headphones at the gym just because it's fun to listen to your own music. It's not necessarily this grand commentary on social isolation or women being terrified of being approached. Like, we don't need to overthink it. It reminds me of years ago when selfies started to become popular. People turned the concept of the selfie into this grand commentary on the millennial generation, how millennials like myself are so self-absorbed and just vain. And I'm thinking, you know, did you ever consider that selfies are popular now, not because we're more vain than any other generation, but literally just because cameras now, or phones now have cameras on both sides, so we can easily take selfies. Like, that's it. It's just a convenience thing. So getting practical with this, who cares that a woman has earbuds in or headphones in? Just go talk to her anyway. If you're decently attractive, she's going to be glad that you talk to her. And if you're not decently attractive, then she'll probably still be polite. I don't want to go too deep into a tangent here, but I see this all the time on the Our Christian Dating subreddit and elsewhere. Men saying things like, and we know you can't approach women anymore at the gym. Yes, you can. I haven't been doing it lately, but I used to do it all the time. It's not a big deal. And I never once had one of these scary moments where a woman started screaming, "Get away from me, I have mace," or something like that. So yeah, the fact that women are wearing earbuds really does not mean anything. Just go and talk to them. And I'll do a video later on how to do it properly. There's better and worse ways to do it. But anyway, not the point of this video.
I try to say hi to men and women. And here's the problem. Approach anxiety happens when you are trying to snipe.
Okay, I'm going to skip over that.
That's the whole thing, is like you want to put out a vibe that's community building. So you build familiarity with many people, and then you attract the right friends and right women. And this is the approach key, is like when I'm sitting at the coffee shop or the bar, it's like, say hello to the person to your right, the person to your left. When in line, talk to the grandma in front of you, then talk to the cute cashier. Like, and that's the thing, is it's becoming more sociable. And many people are going to be like, oh, I'm an introvert, I don't do that. Bullshit. This is what is required of you to move.
So I agree with that. You should be building opportunities or finding opportunities to improve your social skills. Should be going out of your way to be sociable. Calling yourself shy or an introvert is lame. That's weak, especially if you're a man. That's really unmasculine. I definitely naturally introverted. I was very, very shy growing up. In my early 20s, I just had to make the conscious decision. I am going to get better at talking to people. I'm going to learn how to have engaging bi-directional conversations. And I created opportunities to do that. And it definitely helped my dating life. I feel super, super comfortable on dates. I don't think I've had many dates at all that were awkward. Women always seem engaged and comfortable around me. And yeah, it's led to many great dates as a result. All right, so let's skip ahead.
And at the fucking club, and I'm like a 7 out of 10 and charismatic, most guys aren't going to be able to make it, right? So I'm just sharing this because it's like, yo, that doesn't even work for me. That doesn't even work for like 8, 9 out of 10. I know super successful guys that doesn't even work for, right? And the few guys that I do know who are successful in dating do this. They build community, they interact with community, and they're known and familiar in large worlds.
All right, so now he's talking about what works in guys that he knows that are successful. He's kind of, I skipped over it, but basically he's kind of admitting he's not having a lot of dating success despite using a strategy. I think he even says at the end he's offering like coaching or that kind of thing, which I find kind of odd, like why you would offer coaching in this area if you're not having a lot of success. But we're going to go into our analysis now, and I'm going to tell you what I think is going on here. So like a lot of red pillars, and by the way, just do a real quick recap if you're not familiar with the pills. Blue pill is kind of the idea that if you just be yourself, it's sufficient to attract a high value mate. Red pill is the idea that self-improvement is necessary. You can't just be yourself, so you got to improve yourself socially, physically, financially, etc. And then black pill is the idea that self-improvement has a ceiling, and at that point you're really limited by your genes and your looks. And so, you know, there's certain types of guys that no matter how much they self-improve, they're never going to be able to get that dream spouse they want because they're just literally not physically attractive enough. And so it's not hopeless for those people. I get tired of people who make black pill look like it's just hopeless doom and gloom. That's a direction some people go with black pill, but that's not inherently what the concept means. The concept inherently just means there's a limit to the self-improvement you can do. And I think that's rational. Recognize that as rational. So this guy is definitely red pilled, kind of a mix of blue pill and red pill. He's not black pilled though. And so, like a lot of red pillars, he's blaming dating apps and society for his dating frustrations rather than accepting that he is not as attractive as he thinks he is. So I think he's somebody that would benefit from a little bit more black pill thinking within his attraction theory. And so we saw some examples of this guy, Wisdom Warriors. I think his name is actually Christian, is an inflated view of his attractiveness. In the first video, he mentioned early on that his parents think his standards are too high, and he acknowledges that they are really high. And by the way, you can make your standards as high as you want. I just don't think you should go on the internet and complain and pontificate when you're not able to attract your dream spouse. But I'm not opposed at all to people saying, you know what, my standards are too high, and I know I'm never going to be able to meet someone that both meets them and is interested in me, so I'm probably going to be single my whole life. If that's you, more power to you. God bless you. I respect that. And then in the other video, which we did not watch, but actually I do want to watch this because this is really on the nose. Let's go to 250.
Things like this, right? If I may be so bold here, I am a high value man and working to be, the greatest quality I possibly can be. I'm intelligent, I'm charismatic, I'm purpose driven, I'm confident. I work on myself and try to be the best I can. And I hope the same for you. I hope you think about yourself that way. And this, is revealed whenever I'm in familiar worlds, like growing up in high school, going to college, going to ecstatic dance these days. These are.
All right. So I did not show that clip just now to make fun of him or belittle him. I do believe he's a high value man, but you can still be high value and have inflated expectations or unreasonable standards or even a bit of an entitlement complex. So then in the first video, which we just watched, we also saw how he thinks he's a 7 out of 10 in terms of his looks. I totally disagree with that. Somebody might say, well, on his scale, he is a 7 out of 10. The problem with that argument is that the human population doesn't fit within that, as I call it, the bro scale, where the bro scale is when any hot woman at all is a 10 out of 10. Like, oh, yo, bro, check that out. She's a 10. No, that's not how the human population works. That's not how looks works. If you're going to Walmart, if you're going to the mall or whatever, you can't actually work on that kind of scale. So I don't buy the counter argument of, well, he actually is just a 7 out of 10 on his scale. If he's a 7 out of 10 on a scale that doesn't work and doesn't exist, it's still not going to help him. He needs to be operating on a scale that actually reflects the human population. So I think he's overestimating his dating market value. He might call it sexual market value, which is a red pill term. I prefer dating market value because I think they overemphasize the sexual aspect of dating, but we don't need to go into that. So I touched on this already, but he uses the term unfamiliar dating worlds to mean a place in which looks aren't the primary driver of sexual attraction. He uses the term unfamiliar dating worlds to mean a place in which looks are the primary driver of sexual attraction. Basically, if you want to be even more blunt about it, unfamiliar dating worlds are kind of like where black pill is definitely true. Looks rule. And then a familiar dating world for him is basically a place where his red pill attraction theory is true, where he can develop himself into this, financially competent, good looking, socially skilled man. And all of this is going to mix together to create a high value man. And I do agree that mixes together to create a high value man. But where this messes up, and let me minimize this so you can actually see this. I showed this in an earlier video. I'm going to show it more in future videos. This is Quadrants, as I call it, a simple guide to sexual relationships. I think this succinctly explains how human attraction actually works for both men and women. And once you understand this, you'll be able to make a lot more sense of behavior, dating behavior for both men and women. So on the y-axis, we have primary characteristics, the primary characteristic of looks, which is face, height, body, race, age. And then on the x-axis, we have secondary characteristics, which is everything else: worldview, character, personality, wealth, status, hobbies, life goals, family, location. So both the primary and the secondary characteristics mix together to create a high value person, a high value man or a high value woman. So I would never say that just looks determine your value, but here's what is key, and here's what a lot of red pillars don't understand. Here's what blue pillars definitely don't understand. Looks is still the first threshold. Like, you have to pass the looks threshold before women are going to care about your secondary characteristics. And so Wisdom Warriors, he wants to live in a world where that's not true. He wants to live in a world where the looks threshold isn't the first threshold. He wants to live in a world where this whole, constellation or conglomeration of characteristics just lumped together, that's just one single threshold. And that's just not the way humans work. So until he, I think, accepts that, I think he's always going to have a lot of frustration, and he's going to, immediately eschew or be frustrated with dating apps, rather than viewing dating apps as just kind of a reflection of, the way attraction actually works, maybe magnified. But even, and this is key, even in what he calls familiar worlds, let's say rec leagues, church, different social groups, friends groups, or whatever, it's still true that looks is the first threshold. But the reason men who say average looking men feel like they have more success, I think, in those worlds, is because you can be right on the edge with a woman in terms of attraction in one of those worlds, in one of those zones, and the secondary characteristics are going to be more readily available to push you over. Versus the dating app, it's like you can't really, gather someone's character just by looking at dating app profile. You do have to set up a date. You have to go meet them. You have to spend time with them. It is more effort. So I agree that for average looking men, you definitely want to be out there in the more familiar dating worlds, the communities and whatnot, where you can display your secondary characteristics. But you might as well be on dating apps as well. That's kind of one of the takeaways from this video. It's not either or, and it's certainly, there's no point in just sitting and crying and complaining about dating apps, because they do work. They do exactly what they advertise. But yeah, it's going to be a grind for average looking men. Okay, so put really bluntly, Wisdom Warriors wants to be in a community where red pill attraction theory is true, not black pill attraction theory. I don't think that's ever going to happen. I think even in his in-person communities, he's going to get measured by his looks. That's going to be the first threshold. And again, it's not really clear, but it seems like he is in these communities, and he's still not having a lot of dating success. Could be wrong. Maybe I got the wrong impression from the video. But yeah, I think he needs to kind of wake up on this point. All right, so I'm not going to make a judgment about whether Wisdom Warrior is entitled. I think and I also do think he is a high value man. Earlier when he said he was intelligent, socially skilled, ambitious, I believe all that. He's probably in great physical shape. But I think he needs to come to grips with his actual dating market value. He shouldn't blame dating apps and society when he seems to be casting a wide net and yet isn't getting results. So let's go down to the takeaways for you. First of all, the dating market is not broken. So if you're one of these guys that's kind of on the same train as Wisdom Warrior, where you're complaining about dating apps and complaining about feminism or this and that, I absolutely agree that we live in a different dating market. I do agree that feminism has caused a lot of issues. But at the end of the day, those aren't the reasons you're single. There's only 3 possible reasons why you're single. I've shared this in a previous video. I'm going to go over them again briefly. First of all, you're not in a location where you have options or are valued. And this actually does tie into Wisdom Warrior's point. If you're just on dating apps and you're an average looking guy, then you're not in a place where you're valued. So you should be in community as well. But this also ties into things like if you live in the middle of nowhere and you have high standards, well, okay, you probably should move closer to a city where you have more options. But let's not pretend that we're living in this dystopian world where you only have access to the opposite sex through dating apps. That's not the case. There are options and you can pursue them, which ties in the next point. Another reason you might be single is that you're not casting a wide net. So again, if you're just on dating apps or just doing in-person community, then it's going to be a problem. And I'm going to give you an example now that honestly contradicts Wisdom Warrior pretty hard. It's just an anecdote, just a single anecdote. You know, you don't want to put a lot of stock in a single into a single anecdote. But I have a relative who decided to pursue women through his sports league primarily over the course of a couple years. He's good looking. He's a high value man, tall, handsome, great job, tech job, all that stuff. And just due to lack of volume, I would say he did not, I don't know if he got any dates at all. I can't recall, but needless to say, it wasn't a success. So finally, after a couple years of this, maybe even 3 years, he decided to get back on dating apps. So, you know, instead of just pursuing this one avenue, he decided to pursue, cast a wider net. He's still involved in the sports leagues, the rec leagues, but now he's also in dating apps. And guess what happened when he got on dating apps? Within like 2 weeks, he had a girlfriend. He's not a Chad. So it's the exact opposite of what Wisdom Warrior is kind of teaching. And that can happen even for average looking guys. The point isn't that dating apps are amazing for average looking guys. The point is that you should cast a wide net. That's what Wisdom Warrior should do. That's what everyone should do who's trying to pursue a high value spouse for a long-term relationship. Now, practically, I said this in my other video as well. If you're looking for a high value spouse, especially if you're an average looking guy, finding dates should feel like a part-time job. It is a grind. It is an effort. You can't just throw up a dating profile. You can't just show up at your local volleyball tournament. And next thing you know, you're going to have someone's number or be going on dates. It's not that simple. It does take effort. And it might take months to get even a single date. And then lastly, and this maybe ties into more of my concern with Wisdom Warrior, because I do think he's in a location where he's valued. He certainly seems to be casting a wide net. Third reason you could be single is that you're not attractive enough to the people you find attractive. So your standards are just too high. So if you're a 5 out of 10 in the looks department, for example, you're highly unlikely to pull a 7 out of 10, no matter how excellent your personality and character are. And there's people who will argue with that and claim, nope, that's not true. You just got to be confident enough. Or I know this one guy from high school, he's with this absolute babe and she's so much better looking. People always have their little pet counter examples, but I'm interested in what is true the majority of the time. You know, if it's true 90% of the time, then I'm going to call that the rule. And the fact that there's some exceptions to that, don't disprove the rule. And also, in terms of dating strategy, is your dating strategy, I'm going to be in that 10%? I'm going to be the exception? I mean, that's how you end up 45 and single. Telling yourself for 20 years, no, I'm going to be the exception. I'm going to be the guy who clearly is not attractive to the women that he finds attractive, but I'm just going to keep going after them anyway, and eventually on the basis of niche appeal or luck or whatever, I'm going to find one. I mean, you can do that, but like I said, good luck to you. All right, so that concludes this video. If you like what you heard, please subscribe, tell a friend, leave a comment below. Let me know what else you want to see. Let me know if you enjoyed this reaction style video. And then if you want coaching from me, if you want a detailed analysis of your situation, why you might be struggling, where your blind spots are at, go into the description, see how to contact me, get together with me, and we'll figure it out. So with that, I will see you in the next video.